Consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I, a faithless sinner, renew and ratify today in thy hands, O Immaculate Mother, the vows of my baptism. I renounce Satan, his pomps and works, and I give myself entirely to Jesus Christ, the incarnate wisdom, to carry my cross after him all the days of my life and to be more faithful to him than I have ever been before. In the presence of all the heavenly court, I choose thee this day for my mother and mistress. I deliver and consecrate to thee, as thy slave, my body and soul, my goods both interior and exterior, and even the value of all my good actions past, present, and future, leaving to thee the entire and full right of disposing of me and all that belongs to me, without exception, according to thy good pleasure, for the greater glory of God in time and in eternity. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Before we begin, take a moment to slow down. Wherever you are right now, allow yourself to pause. This moment is not an accident. You are here because your soul is searching for rest, for peace, for meaning beyond the noise of everyday life. Let the weight you have been carrying gently loosen its grip. The worries about money, the pressure of responsibilities, the fear of not knowing what tomorrow will bring, the quiet exhaustion that no one else sees. For just this moment, you do not have to fix anything. You do not have to prove anything. You do not have to be strong. Breathe in slowly, and as you breathe out, let your heart soften. This is a sacred moment, a moment to step away from the rush of the world and step into the presence of God. A moment to place yourself under the gentle gaze of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, a heart that has never stopped loving, never stopped interceding, never stopped caring for her children. Many of us come here today feeling tired of trying, tired of hoping, tired of waiting for things to change. Some come with heavy hearts, carrying unspoken pain. Some come with financial stress, wondering how they will make it through another month. Some come feeling lost, uncertain, or spiritually dry. And some come simply because their soul feels restless, longing for something deeper, something true. Wherever you find yourself, you are welcome here. God does not ask you to come perfect. He only asks you to come honest. The Immaculate Heart of Mary is not distant or cold. It is a refuge, a place of safety, a place where broken hearts are held with tenderness and patience. As we begin this time of prayer and consecration, allow yourself to approach with humility, not with fear, not with shame, but with trust. Trust that God sees you. Trust that He knows your struggles. Trust that He understands your fears even when you cannot put them into words. Mary understands them too. She understands what it means to trust when the future is unclear. She understands what it means to surrender when the path ahead is unknown. She understands what it means to say yes to God even when it feels overwhelming. In her life, Mary faced uncertainty, hardship, and sacrifice. Yet her heart remained anchored in God, not because life was easy, but because she trusted completely. That same invitation is extended to you today. Consecration is not about losing yourself. It is about finding yourself in God's care. It is about allowing your life, every part of it, to be guided, protected, and shaped by divine love. As we prepare our hearts, it is important to let go of distractions. If your mind wanders, gently bring it back. If emotions rise, do not resist them. Offer them. This is not a performance. This is a conversation of the heart. You may feel unworthy. You may feel distant from God. You may feel like you have failed too many times. None of that disqualifies you. In fact, it is precisely the reason you are here. God does not wait for you to become better before He loves you. He loves you first, and His love transforms you. Mary does not reject wounded souls, she gathers them. As you enter this prayer, imagine placing your life into her hands. Not just the parts you are proud of, but also the parts you hide, your fears, your doubts, your financial worries, your mistakes, your unanswered questions. Nothing is too small, nothing is too broken. Consecration is an act of trust. It is saying, I no longer want to carry everything alone. It is saying, I choose to place my life under God's care through the heart of my mother. The world teaches us to control, to grasp, to protect ourselves at all costs. But the gospel teaches us something different. It teaches us that surrender is not weakness, it is strength. True peace does not come from having everything figured out. It comes from knowing who holds your life. As this prayer unfolds, you are invited to open your heart slowly, gently, honestly. There is no rush, there is no pressure. Let this be a sacred pause in your day, a quiet meeting between your soul and God. You may not feel anything dramatic. You may not feel an immediate change. That is okay. Faith often works quietly, like a seed planted in the soil. It grows beneath the surface long before it breaks through. Trust the process, trust the prayer, trust the one who called you here. In this moment, let us begin by placing ourselves in the presence of the Holy Trinity, the Father who loves you into existence, the Son who gave His life for you, the Holy Spirit who breathes life, peace, and renewal into your soul. And let us place ourselves under the loving protection of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, who leads us gently, faithfully, and securely to Jesus. As we move forward, allow your heart to remain open. Allow your spirit to remain humble. Allow your trust to grow, even if only a little. This is the beginning of a journey of surrender, a journey of healing, a journey of deeper faith, and you do not walk it alone. The meaning of consecration, why we choose to give ourselves. To consecrate oneself is one of the most misunderstood acts in spiritual life. Yet, it is also one of the most liberating. Many people hear the word consecration and think it means loss, restriction, or giving up control in a way that feels frightening. In truth, consecration is not about losing your life. It is about placing your life where it can finally be protected, guided, and healed. It is an act of trust born not from strength, but from humility. It begins when the soul recognizes that carrying everything alone has become too heavy. In daily life, we are taught to rely on ourselves, to plan every detail, to secure our future through effort, strategy, and control. We are told that if we do not hold everything tightly, it will fall apart. Over time, this way of living exhausts the heart. The constant pressure to succeed, to provide, to make the right decisions, and to avoid failure slowly drains our inner peace. Many people who come to consecration do so not because life is going well, but because they have reached the limits of their own strength. Consecration is the quiet confession of the soul that says, I cannot do this alone anymore. It is not an admission of defeat, it is the beginning of freedom. When you consecrate yourself, you are not handing your life over to uncertainty, but to a mother who sees more clearly than you ever could. The Immaculate Heart of Mary does not lead blindly. It leads with wisdom, patience, and perfect obedience to God's will. To entrust your life to her is to place it in hands that have never failed to lead souls closer to Christ. At its core, consecration is an act of belonging. In a world where many feel abandoned, unseen, or unprotected, consecration restores the truth that you are not alone. You belong to God, you are cared for, you are guided. Through Mary, this belonging becomes deeply personal and tender. She does not dominate your life, she nurtures it. She does not erase your personality. She purifies and strengthens it. Many struggle with the idea of surrender because they associate it with loss of freedom. But spiritual surrender is different from worldly surrender. When you surrender to fear, you become trapped. When you surrender to despair, you become paralyzed. But when you surrender to God through Mary, you become free. Free from constant anxiety. Free from the illusion that everything depends on you. Free from the exhausting need to control outcomes that were never meant to be controlled. Consecration does not mean that difficulties disappear. Financial challenges may still arise. Family struggles may still exist. Uncertainty may still accompany your days. What changes is not always the circumstance, but the weight it carries. When your life is consecrated, you no longer face hardship alone. Every burden is shared, every worry is offered, every fear is placed into hands stronger and wiser than your own. The Immaculate Heart of Mary is a heart that listens. It is attentive to the quiet cries of the soul, the prayers whispered in moments of despair, the tears shed in silence. When you consecrate yourself, you are not required to explain everything perfectly. You are simply invited to trust. Trust that even when you do not understand what God is doing, He is still working. Trust that even delays have purpose. Trust that even suffering, when surrendered, can be transformed. Many people seek consecration because they long for peace, not temporary relief, but deep, lasting peace. The kind of peace that remains even when circumstances are unstable. This peace does not come from having more money, more certainty, or more control. It comes from knowing where your life rests. A consecrated soul learns to rest not in outcomes, but in God's providence. Through consecration, you allow Mary to shape your heart according to the heart of Christ. She teaches patience where there is impatience, trust where there is fear, generosity where there is attachment, and hope where there is discouragement. Slowly, often imperceptibly, your inner world begins to change. You respond differently to stress. You pray instead of panic. You hope instead of despair. You wait instead of forcing doors that are not yet meant to open. Consecration is also an act of love. Love responds not with calculation, but with self-gift. Just as Mary gave her whole life to God without reserve, consecration invites you to do the same, according to your state in life. This does not mean neglecting responsibilities, it means offering them. Your work becomes an offering, your struggles become prayer, your efforts become acts of trust. When you consecrate yourself, you allow Mary to take what is small and make it fruitful. Even your failures, when surrendered, are not wasted. They become lessons. They become pathways of humility. They become places where grace can enter. Nothing given to God with sincerity is ever lost. In a world driven by fear of scarcity, consecration teaches abundance of trust. In a world obsessed with self-reliance, consecration teaches holy dependence. In a world that glorifies control, consecration teaches peace through surrender. This is why consecration is not weakness. It is courage. It takes courage to let go. It takes courage to trust. It takes courage to believe that God's plan is kinder and wiser than your own. As you continue this journey of prayer, remember that consecration is not a single moment, but a daily posture of the heart. Each day, you choose again to trust. Each day, you offer again what you cannot control. Each day, you place your life once more into the Immaculate Heart that never grows tired of loving you. And in that daily offering, your soul slowly learns what true freedom feels like. Meditation on the Consecration Prayer, entering the words with the heart. As we now enter more deeply into the words of the Consecration Prayer, It is important to remember that this prayer is not meant to be rushed or recited mechanically. Every sentence carries weight. Every phrase opens a door within the soul. This prayer is an invitation to step honestly before God, without masks, without excuses, and without fear. When we say, "I, a faithless sinner," we are not condemning ourselves, nor are we lowering our worth. We are acknowledging the truth of the human condition. We are admitting that we are fragile, imperfect, and in constant need of grace. This honesty is not weakness. It is the foundation of genuine spiritual life. God does not work with illusions. He works with truth. And truth begins when we stop pretending we are self-sufficient. To call oneself a sinner in prayer is not to dwell in guilt, but to open space for mercy. It is to recognize that despite our best intentions, we fall short, we forget God, we choose comfort over obedience, and fear over trust. Yet even in this admission, there is hope, because the prayer does not stop at our failure. It immediately places that brokenness into the hands of the Immaculate Mother. We renew and ratify the vows of our baptism because baptism is the moment when we first belonged entirely to God. Over time, life distracts us. Responsibilities, wounds, disappointments, and worldly pressures slowly pull us away. This renewal is a conscious return. It is the soul saying, "I remember who I am, and I choose again whom I belong to." When we renounce Satan, his pomps, and his works, we are not merely rejecting something external or symbolic. We are renouncing the subtle ways darkness enters our lives, fear that paralyzes us, pride that isolates us, greed that convinces us we never have enough, resentment that poisons our hearts, and despair that whispers that nothing will ever change. These are not abstract ideas, they are daily struggles. This renunciation is a declaration of freedom. It is a refusal to let lies shape our identity or dictate our future. By renouncing these influences, we create room for Christ to reign more fully within us. Giving ourselves entirely to Jesus Christ, the incarnate wisdom, is a radical statement in a world that values independence above all else. To give oneself entirely means holding nothing back, not even the parts of life we fear to surrender. It means trusting Christ not only with our spiritual life, but with our decisions, our finances, our relationships, our health, and our future. Carrying the cross after Him does not mean seeking suffering, but accepting that love always requires sacrifice. It means choosing faithfulness even when obedience is inconvenient, and trust even when outcomes are uncertain. When the prayer speaks of choosing Mary as mother and mistress in the presence of the entire heavenly court, it reminds us that this act of consecration is not hidden or insignificant. It is witnessed. It matters. Heaven responds to sincere surrender. To call Mary our mother is to accept her care, her intercession, and her guidance. To call her mistress is to acknowledge her authority in leading us to Christ. This authority is not harsh or controlling. It is maternal, wise, and deeply protective. Mary does not replace Christ. She brings us to Him more securely and more quickly. The words that follow are among the most challenging and the most transformative, delivering and consecrating our body and soul, our interior and exterior goods, and even the value of all our good actions. This is where many hearts hesitate. We are often willing to give God our prayers, but reluctant to give Him our plans. We offer our words, but cling tightly to control. This total consecration invites us to go further. It asks us to trust that nothing placed in God's hands through Mary will be wasted. Even our good works, which we might be tempted to claim as our own, are offered back so that they may bear greater fruit according to God's will, not our limited understanding. Interior goods include our thoughts, desires, intentions, and emotions. Exterior goods include our time, resources, talents, and material possessions. To consecrate both is to say that nothing in our life exists outside of God's care. This does not mean passivity or irresponsibility. It means alignment. It means allowing God to direct how and when our efforts bear fruit. It means releasing the anxiety that comes from constantly measuring success by visible results. Perhaps the most profound surrender in this prayer is the willingness to let Mary dispose of everything according to her good pleasure, for the greater glory of God in time and in eternity. These words confront our deepest fear, the fear of losing control. Yet they also offer our deepest peace. God's glory is not opposed to our good. What glorifies God ultimately heals us. Even when the path includes trials, eternity gives meaning to time. What feels like delay, loss, or struggle now may be preparing a deeper joy than we can imagine. As this prayer concludes with the Trinitarian invocation, we are reminded that consecration is not an isolated devotion. It is participation in the life of God Himself. The Father receives our offering, the Son redeems it, and the Holy Spirit sanctifies it. Through Mary, our small and fragile surrender is lifted into the infinite love of the Trinity. This meditation invites us to linger with the words, to let them echo within us long after the prayer ends. Consecration is not magic. It does not eliminate effort or guarantee immediate results, but it reorders the heart. It teaches the soul where to rest. Over time, the consecrated heart begins to recognize God's presence not only in moments of prayer, but in ordinary life. Decisions are made with greater peace. Difficulties are faced with deeper trust. Even silence becomes meaningful. If at any moment you feel resistance, fear, or hesitation, do not withdraw, stay. Offer that resistance itself. God works gently, patiently, and respectfully. Mary never forces the heart, she waits for it to open. This prayer is not meant to overwhelm you, but to free you. It is an invitation to stop striving and begin trusting, to stop fearing and begin surrendering, and to stop carrying life alone and allow yourself to be carried. Applying consecration to daily life. Living trust in a fragile world. Consecration does not end when the prayer is finished. In many ways, it truly begins there. The words spoken in prayer are meant to take flesh in daily life, in ordinary moments, hidden struggles, and quiet decisions that no one else sees. A consecrated life is not lived apart from the world, but deeply within it, transformed from the inside out. It is lived in the tension between faith and uncertainty, trust and fear, surrender and responsibility. The difference is not that the consecrated soul avoids hardship, but that hardship is no longer faced alone. One of the first places where consecration touches daily life is anxiety. Anxiety about money, about the future, about providing for loved ones, about making the right decisions. Many people live with a constant inner tension, a quiet fear that something will go wrong and they will not be able to handle it. Consecration does not magically remove these concerns, but it changes how they are carried. Instead of allowing fear to dominate the heart, the consecrated soul learns to pause, to pray, and to entrust. Over time, anxiety loses its absolute power. It becomes something offered, not something obeyed. Financial stress is one of the most common burdens people bring into consecration. Bills, debt, instability, and uncertainty weigh heavily on the heart. The world tells us that security comes from accumulation and control. Consecration teaches a different truth. Security comes from trust in God's providence. This does not mean neglecting work or responsibility. It means releasing the belief that your worth or safety depends entirely on financial outcomes. A consecrated person still works diligently. plans wisely, and acts responsibly, but without panic. They learn to do what they can, and then place the rest into God's hands, trusting that He sees needs before they become crises. In daily life, consecration slowly reshapes how we respond to difficulties. When something goes wrong, the immediate reaction may still be frustration or fear. This is human, but the consecrated heart learns to return more quickly to trust. Instead of spiraling into worry, it learns to ask, "Where is God in this?" instead of forcing solutions out of fear. It learns to wait when waiting is required, and to act when action is guided by peace rather than desperation. Consecration also transforms relationships. Many conflicts arise from the desire to control outcomes or to protect oneself from being hurt. When life is consecrated, relationships are no longer driven primarily by fear or self-interest, but by surrender and love. This does not mean tolerating harm or avoiding boundaries. It means responding with patience, humility, and prayer rather than anger or resentment. Over time, the consecrated soul becomes less reactive and more grounded. It listens more, it speaks with greater care, it forgives more freely, not because it forgets pain, but because it entrusts justice and healing to God. In work and daily responsibilities, consecration brings a quiet dignity. Even tasks that feel repetitive or unimportant are offered as acts of faith. The consecrated person begins to understand that value is not measured only by visible success, but by fidelity, showing up, doing one's duty, acting with integrity when no one is watching. These small acts, when offered through Mary, are never insignificant. They become part of a larger work that God is accomplishing beyond what can be seen. Consecration also affects how one experiences waiting. Many prayers are not answered immediately. Doors remain closed longer than expected. Plans change. Delays test patience and faith. In these moments, consecration becomes a lifeline. Instead of interpreting delay as rejection or punishment, the consecrated soul learns to see it as preparation. Waiting becomes an active trust rather than passive frustration. It becomes a space where faith is purified and dependence on God deepens. Suffering, when it comes, is perhaps the greatest test of consecration. Pain challenges trust more than words ever could. Yet, consecration does not ask us to deny suffering. It invites us to unite it with Christ. When pain is offered rather than resisted, it does not lose its reality, but it gains meaning. Mary, who stood at the foot of the cross, understands suffering intimately. She does not remove all pain from the consecrated soul, but she stands with it, intercedes for it, and brings it into the redemptive work of her Son. Over time, consecration cultivates an inner stability that does not depend on external circumstances. This stability is not emotional numbness. It is a deep-rooted peace that allows joy and sorrow to coexist without destroying the soul. The consecrated heart learns that emotions rise and fall, but trust remains. Faith becomes less about feeling and more about choice. A choice to trust even when clarity is absent. A choice to remain faithful even when consolation is gone. Consecration also teaches gratitude. When life is entrusted to God, even small blessings are recognized as gifts rather than entitlements. Gratitude softens the heart. It shifts focus from what is lacking to what is given. This shift does not deny hardship, but it prevents hardship from defining identity. A grateful heart becomes fertile ground for hope. Perhaps most importantly, consecration teaches the soul to live one day at a time. The future no longer needs to be fully controlled because it is entrusted. Each day becomes enough. Each moment becomes an opportunity to trust again. This daily surrender is where consecration becomes real. Not in extraordinary acts, but in ordinary fidelity. Living a consecrated life does not mean you will never struggle. It means that when you do, you will know where to turn. It means that when fear arises, you will remember that your life rests in loving hands. It means that when strength fails, grace remains. Over time, this way of living quietly transforms the soul. Trust replaces fear. Peace replaces panic. Hope replaces despair. And slowly, often without noticing when it began, life becomes lighter. Not because burdens disappear, but because they are no longer carried alone. Final prayer of total surrender, placing everything into loving hands. As we now arrive at this final prayer of surrender, the heart is invited to become very still. This is not a moment for striving, explaining, or negotiating. This is the moment where words gently fade and trust takes their place. Everything that has been spoken, reflected upon, and offered until now leads here to this quiet act of placing one's entire life into the hands of God through the Immaculate Heart of Mary. It is a moment that does not demand perfection, only sincerity. You do not need to feel strong. You do not need to feel certain. You only need to be willing. In this prayer of surrender, you are invited to offer not only what is visible and manageable, but also what feels fragile, confusing, and unresolved. Offer your past with its memories, regrets, and unfinished chapters. Offer your present with its responsibilities, pressures, and unanswered questions. Offer your future, even though it feels unclear and unpredictable. True surrender is not selective. It does not keep certain areas protected from God. It opens everything, trusting that nothing placed in His hands will be harmed or forgotten. Many people hesitate at this point because surrender feels risky. There is a fear that if everything is given, something important might be lost. Yet surrender to God is not abandonment, it is refuge. God does not take in order to diminish. He takes in order to heal, to reorder, and to restore. Through Mary, this surrender is made gentle. She receives what is offered with maternal tenderness and presents it to her Son with perfect love. As you pray, allow yourself to name interiorly what you are carrying, the worries that return late at night, the fears you rarely admit out loud, the exhaustion that comes from trying to hold everything together. Place them one by one into this prayer without rushing. Nothing is too small to offer. Nothing is too heavy. The act of naming these burdens before God is already an act of trust. This surrender also includes your desires, not only your needs, but your hopes, the dreams you are afraid to hope for, the outcomes you secretly long for. Surrender does not erase desire, it purifies it. It aligns desire with God's wisdom. In surrender, you are not saying that your hopes no longer matter. You are saying that you trust God to fulfill them in the way that leads to true life, even if that way looks different from what you imagined. In this prayer, surrender your relationships, those marked by love and those marked by tension, those you cherish and those that cause pain. You are not asked to solve everything. You are asked to entrust. God works in hearts in ways we cannot see or control. When relationships are surrendered, they are no longer carried alone. Healing may come slowly, but grace begins its work immediately. Surrender your work, your finances, and your daily responsibilities. Offer the effort you give each day, even when results feel small or invisible. Offer the fear of not having enough. Offer the pressure to provide, to succeed, to prove your worth. In God's eyes, your value has never depended on productivity or achievement. When these areas are surrendered, they become places where God's providence can move freely, often quietly, often gradually, but always faithfully. This final prayer of surrender is also a surrender of identity. It is letting go of the false selves created by fear, comparison, or failure. It is allowing God to remind you who you truly are: beloved, chosen, and never forgotten. Through Mary, this identity is protected from distortion. She teaches the heart to rest not in performance but in belonging. As you remain in this prayer, allow silence to have space. Silence is not emptiness, it is presence. In silence, God speaks not with explanations, but with peace. You may not receive answers. You may receive something deeper: assurance. The assurance that you are held. The assurance that your life has meaning beyond what you can see. The assurance that grace is at work even when progress feels slow. Surrender is not a single act completed once and for all. It is a posture the soul returns to again and again. This prayer plants that posture deeply within you. Each time you repeat it, surrender becomes less frightening and more familiar. Trust grows, resistance softens. The heart learns that letting go does not lead to loss, but to rest. In this final act of surrender, you may quietly say within your heart that you no longer wish to carry life alone, that you choose trust over fear, faith over control, and hope over despair. These words do not need to be spoken perfectly. God hears the intention beneath them. Mary receives them with care and patience, knowing that surrender unfolds gradually, one offering at a time. Remain here for a moment. Let this surrender settle. There is nothing else to do, nothing else to say. Simply remain. This is enough. You are enough. And in this surrender, grace is already at work, preparing the soul for peace that does not depend on circumstances, strength that does not come from effort, and hope that endures beyond uncertainty. Gentle closing and hope, resting in trust and moving forward in peace. As this time of prayer and consecration gently comes to a close, there is no need to rush back into the noise of the world. Let this moment linger. Let the stillness remain just a little longer. What has taken place here is not dramatic or loud, but it is real. Something has shifted, even if you cannot yet describe it. Trust has been planted. Peace has been invited. Hope has been quietly awakened. You may return to the same circumstances you had before this prayer, the same responsibilities, the same questions, the same uncertainties, but you do not return as the same person. Something within you has learned where to rest. Something within you now knows that life does not need to be carried alone. This knowledge may feel subtle, but it is powerful. It will return to you in moments of fear, in moments of doubt, and in moments when the road ahead feels unclear. Hope, as God offers it, is not denial of difficulty. It is not pretending that everything will suddenly be easy. True hope is deeper. It is the quiet confidence that God is present and active, even when progress feels slow and answers remain hidden. Hope teaches the heart to remain open instead of closing in on itself. It teaches the soul to keep trusting instead of retreating into fear. As you move forward, remember that God's timing rarely matches human expectations, but it is always precise. What feels delayed is often being prepared. What feels lost is often being transformed. What feels empty is often being made ready to receive something new. Through the Immaculate Heart of Mary, your life has been placed into a rhythm of grace that continues long after this prayer ends. There may be days when trust feels easy and days when it feels impossible. Both belong to the journey. On difficult days, do not measure your faith by how calm you feel. Measure it by your willingness to return, again and again, to surrender. Faithfulness is not perfection, it is persistence. It is choosing to trust even when emotions fluctuate and clarity fades. Let this consecration become a quiet anchor in your life. When anxiety rises, remember where you have placed your life. When fear speaks loudly, remember whose hands hold you. When the future feels overwhelming, return to the simplicity of one day at a time. Grace is given daily, not all at once. You are not asked to solve your entire life. You are asked to trust today. Hope also grows through gratitude. As you move forward, allow yourself to notice small signs of grace, moments of calm, unexpected help, strength where you thought you had none. These are not coincidences. They are reminders. They are whispers of God's faithfulness, gently confirming that your surrender is not ignored. The Immaculate Heart of Mary continues to accompany you. She does not step away when prayer ends. She remains near, interceding, guiding, and protecting. When words fail, her presence speaks. When strength falters, her care sustains. She leads quietly, never drawing attention to herself, always pointing toward her Son. As you conclude this time of prayer, you may carry a simple intention in your heart to trust a little more today than yesterday. That is enough. Growth in faith is not measured in leaps, but in small, faithful steps. Each act of trust, no matter how small, opens space for peace. If at any point you feel discouraged, remember this moment. Remember that you have chosen surrender. Remember that you are held. Remember that even when you cannot see the path clearly, you are not lost. God does not abandon what has been entrusted to Him. What is placed in love remains in love. Allow yourself now to rest in this assurance. There is nothing left to prove, nothing left to earn. Simply receive. Receive the peace that does not depend on circumstances. Receive the hope that does not fade with uncertainty. Receive the quiet strength that comes from knowing you are guided. As you return to your day, may this prayer continue to echo gently within you. May trust shape your choices. May peace guard your heart. May hope accompany your steps. And may you walk forward knowing that your life rests safely in loving hands, today and always. Daily renewal of consecration. Walking with God, one step at a time. Consecration is not meant to remain a beautiful memory tied to a single moment of prayer. It is meant to become a way of living. After the words have been spoken and the silence has settled, life continues with its ordinary rhythm. Responsibilities return. Challenges reappear. Emotions fluctuate. This is where consecration quietly proves its depth. It becomes a daily renewal, not always spoken aloud, but lived through small choices made with trust. Each morning offers a new opportunity to renew consecration in the heart. This renewal does not require long prayers or perfect focus. It can be as simple as an interior act of trust, a quiet acknowledgement that the day is not carried alone. When you begin the day by offering it, even briefly, the heart is gently oriented toward God. The day may still unfold with surprises and difficulties, but it begins from a place of surrender rather than anxiety. Daily renewal teaches patience. Many people expect immediate transformation after moments of deep prayer. When change feels slow, discouragement can arise. Consecration invites a different understanding of growth. God works gradually, respecting the pace of the soul. Each day of renewed trust strengthens the heart in ways that are often invisible at first. Over time, patterns of fear loosen, reactions soften. Faith becomes more instinctive than forced. Renewal also means returning to surrender when trust falters. There will be days when fear speaks louder than faith. On those days, consecration is not revoked. It is renewed precisely through weakness. Returning to God with honesty, without self-accusation, deepens humility and dependence. Mary understands this rhythm well. She knows that faith matures not through constant confidence, but through faithful return. As consecration becomes part of daily life, prayer itself changes. Prayer becomes less about asking for specific outcomes and more about aligning the heart with God's presence. Silence becomes more comfortable. Trust becomes more natural. The soul begins to recognize God's guidance not only in moments of clarity, but also in moments of uncertainty. Daily renewal also shapes how decisions are made. Instead of reacting immediately out of fear or impulse, the consecrated heart learns to pause. This pause creates space for discernment. Choices begin to be guided by peace rather than pressure. Even when decisions are difficult, they are made with greater interior freedom. Living consecration day by day does not mean becoming detached from life. It means becoming more deeply present to it without being consumed by it. Joy is received with gratitude rather than fear of loss. Sorrow is endured with hope rather than despair. Life is no longer something to survive, but something to entrust. In this daily renewal, consecration becomes less about words and more about posture. A posture of openness, a posture of trust, a posture of availability. The heart learns to remain receptive to grace, even in ordinary moments that seem insignificant. Over time, this way of living gently transforms the soul, anchoring it in peace that remains steady amid change. A blessing for the journey ahead, continuing life held by grace. As this time of prayer and reflection fully settles into your heart, allow yourself to receive a blessing, not as a final word, but as a gentle continuation. What has been entrusted here does not end when the prayer ends. It carries forward into the rhythm of your days, into the ordinary moments that quietly shape your life. Grace does not rush, it remains. It walks with you patiently, faithfully, and without condition. As you move forward, may you carry with you the deep assurance that your life is not random, and your struggles are not unnoticed. God sees the whole of your journey, not only where you are now, but where you are being led. Even when the path feels unclear, even when progress feels slow, even when answers seem delayed, grace is still at work. Often, its most powerful movements are the ones that happen quietly, beneath the surface, beyond what can be immediately understood. May you learn to trust this hidden work of God. When circumstances do not change as quickly as you hoped, may your heart remain open rather than discouraged. When prayers seem unanswered, may your faith deepen rather than withdraw. Waiting is not wasted time in God's hands. It is often the place where the soul is strengthened, refined, and prepared for what is to come. May peace accompany you, not as an escape from difficulty, but as a steady presence within it. May peace remind you that you are not required to have everything figured out. You are only asked to remain faithful, one step at a time. Let peace guard your heart against the temptation to panic, to compare, or to measure your life by the pace of others. Your journey unfolds according to a wisdom greater than your own. May hope take root deeply within you, not the fragile hope that depends on ideal outcomes, but the enduring hope that rests in God's faithfulness. Hope that remains when circumstances are uncertain. Hope that sustains when strength feels limited. Hope that quietly whispers that even now, even here, God is working for good. May you come to recognize that your worth is not defined by success, productivity, or approval. You are valuable because you are loved. This truth does not change when you feel strong or weak, confident or uncertain. Carry this truth with you into your work, your relationships, and your moments of solitude. Let it steady you when doubt arises and remind you who you are when fear attempts to distort your identity. May gratitude become a gentle habit of your heart, not forced or artificial, but sincere and attentive. May you notice small signs of grace woven into your day's moments of calm, unexpected kindness, quiet strength, and subtle guidance. These moments are not insignificant. They are reminders that you are accompanied, supported, and cared for in ways that often go unnoticed until they are remembered. May the Immaculate Heart of Mary remain close to you as a constant source of tenderness and guidance. In moments of confusion, may her quiet faith steady your own. In moments of sorrow, may her compassion remind you that pain carried in love is never meaningless. In moments of decision, may her example draw you closer to trust and obedience. She walks with you not to draw attention to herself, but to lead you faithfully toward her Son. As you continue your journey, there may be times when trust feels effortless and times when it feels difficult. Both are part of growth. Do not judge yourself harshly in moments of struggle. Return again to surrender. Return again to trust. Each return strengthens the soul more than uninterrupted confidence ever could. May your life gradually reflect the peace that comes from knowing where it rests. May fear lose its grip as trust grows stronger. May anxiety soften as surrender becomes familiar. May your heart learn, slowly and gently, that it is safe to let go. And when you feel tired, overwhelmed, or unsure, may you remember this truth above all others: you are not alone. You are held, you are guided, you are loved beyond measure. Today, tomorrow, and through every season that lies ahead, grace remains with you, faithful and unchanging, carrying you forward one step at a time. Living from the heart, a life quietly transformed by trust. As this journey continues beyond words and prayer,